Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and super excited tonight. This is going to be a really terrific show. I know you guys are all going to enjoy it out there tonight. We're bringing back, of course, the Coach's Corner, and I got a great group of gentlemen coming on here in just a moment to join me on the panel. And also later on in the show, I'm going to be interviewing Ron Korn. He's a PGA professional up in the New Jersey area. He's the head professional, actually, at the Cedar Hill Country Club in Livingston, New Jersey, and he was also the 2005 New Jersey PGA Teacher of the Year. So he's going to be joining me in about an hour's time, but we've got the panel here. But before I bring those gentlemen on, let me just remind everybody that the program is live every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time here on blogtalkradio.com. Easiest way to get to the show is visit www.blogtalkradio.com, and up in the search key you can type in Golf Talk Live, and that will bring you to the home page for the program. Always at the top on Thursday from 6 to 8 is the current program, which you're listening to live. And after you do so, if you want to go down and check out some of the previously recorded programs, you just scroll down a little bit further on the page and you'll come across to the on-demand section, and you'll be able to listen to any of the previously recorded programs if you weren't able to tune in live. Also, you can listen in through as podcasts through iTunes. If you go to itunes.com, under the podcast section, again, just type in Golf Talk Live, and you can listen to all of the shows in its entirety through iTunes for those of you that like to do that. Or you can also go to Stitcher.com and catch the program there as well. Appreciate you joining me tonight. Don't forget, anytime during the live broadcast on Thursdays, you can call into the program and talk to any of the guests on here or to myself, and you can do so by calling area code 646-716-4667. That's 646-716-4667. Or you can email any questions or comments to me during the show or after the show at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com, and I appreciate all the questions that have come in for tonight's show. Also, don't forget to follow on social media. On Facebook, you can go to Golf Talk Live blog. Make sure you have blog on the end. And while you're there visiting the page and looking at some of the updates on there, make sure that you like the page while you're there, and I appreciate it. Also on Twitter, you can follow me at Ted and Buck CEO. That's CEOs in capital letters. And thank you for all of the recent followers here the last week. Since last week's show. Thank you very much for doing that. And again, you can always get updates either on Facebook or Twitter. Also on Instagram as well at Ted J. Odorico, and that's Odorico. Again, I got a great panel. This is the first Coach's Corner of the year. We did a whole series of it last year, and everybody had a good time, and most of them have all come back here. In fact, I think pretty much everybody has come back here again this year and signed up for the panel. So without any further hesitation, let me introduce the three gentlemen that are going to be on tonight. First is Mr. Chuck Evans. He's the Executive Director of Medicus Golf and also the owner of Chuck Evans Golf. He's also among the top 100 teachers by Golf Magazine in America, as well as Golf Digest top teacher in America. He's also an instructor for several PGA, LPGA, Champions Tour, Nationwide Tour, and top amateurs, as well as author of several national golf articles that he's written for Golf Magazine, Golf Digest, and, of course, Golf Tips. Authored the book, of course, How to Build Your Golf Swing, and he's the co-creator of 5 Simple Keys. We'll bring him out in just a second. Next up is, of course, Gary Okino. He's a #1 best-selling author and inventor of the Mind Technique Synergy. Also, Gary coaches the U.S. Junior Golf Team. Certainly a leading authority on Mind Technique Synergy, or also referred to as MTS as short. Many of his students have used the MTS program with hundreds of events, and have won, hundreds of events at national, junior, state, collegiate, and club levels as well. And lastly, rounding up the panel, of course, is Mr. Pete Buchanan. He's the founder and director of instruction for Plain Simple Golf, which houses Plain Simple Golf Circuit and the Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. He's taught over the last 30 years and was also had a career with John Jacobs Golf Schools, but the last 10 years or so he's been working on his revolutionary new golf swing, which is housed in, of course, the Plain Simple Golf program. Gentlemen, welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Well, thanks, Ted.
Great to be here.
Glad to be here.
I hope I got everything right. That was a lot to get out there, but I wanted to get it out so that everybody could just get an idea of who we've got on the panel. I know most of you have been on here before. If not on the Coach's Corner, you've been on here as a guest as well. And again, thank you very much for giving your time tonight. As I mentioned to you guys off air, one of the things that I'm looking at doing with the Coach's Corner program this year is implementing a new series which I have called Plan for Success. And it's going to be covering basically 6 components. The 7th program is going to be sort of an all-encompassing package of all of the 6 points. But basically it's going to cover, tonight we're going to talk about the mental game, but it's going to be covering fitness, nutrition we want to talk about. We're not going to be doing that tonight, of course, but equipment, instruction, and, of course, practice. And then we're going to put that all together at some point later on over the next couple of months. But tonight, guys, we're going to talk about the mental game. And first off, I want to start it off with a question that was posed by Bob out in Sacramento, California. And he wanted to get an idea of what does positive mental imagery mean. And I'm just going to give you a quick sort of synopsis of that, and then, guys, we're going to jump right in and get some answers here. Basically, positive mental imagery essentially means this: we all have a way of learning and processing information and stimuli, and it's through 5 senses which we have: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and of course smelling. The senses that we use in golf are visual, which is of course falls under seeing; auditory, which voice, rhythm, and balance; and kinesthetic is touching and feeling. Each of us has a dominant sense that we use most of the time, and some are a little stronger than others, and some it might be seeing, some it might be feeling or balance, and so this is something that obviously is very important in helping in our golf instruction to understand that. And I think what I want to do is, Gary, I'm going to start with you, just because I know that you really specialize in that. What are some of the things that we can maybe express to Bob here, that how people can sort of tap into those senses when they're playing and getting ready for golf?
Sure. Well, what we find a lot of times is that we do use all our senses, and we need to know when to use them, I think, is a really important place to start. Mm-hmm. If you look at most folks, they hit the ball okay on the range, they get out to the golf course, and it's a different situation for them, partially because they see different things. So we start with the visual. You start to see all the different stimuli that come at you, whether it be water, trees, past performance of going in the water or the trees,
right,
and with that. So the visual can tend to mess you up. And what we found in performance coaching is that the visual side is actually connected to your left brain, which is your thinking side. So if you're using too much of your eyes and you're thinking too much together, you're going to create stress for yourself, and you're going to take yourself out of a performance state and away from a feel state. This happens to some of the best players. It happens to everyday players. It happens to even me. So the long story short, what I like to see happen is I like to see a student really learn in their practice behavior as well as in their pre-shot routine to actually make some swings every so often if they find themselves getting a little too, let's call it, visually stimulated, to close their eyes and make some swings with their eyes closed so they can feel and sense it with their whole self, as opposed to just trying to fight whatever they're seeing and things like that. And a lot of times what happens is the brain gets crossed up. They think they can play a shot, they feel a certain shot, but then they start seeing too much, and it actually creates a brain imbalance. So what we're finding is visualization. We used to talk a lot about visualize your shot, visualize your shot, visualize your shot. Well, it actually can be counterproductive. And I'll keep it there for now.
Okay, well said. Chuck, let me ask you this, and just sort of keeping on this theme here for a second. Obviously there's some players out there. You've seen it, of course, working with some of the top players. Some players will sense that they're more of a feel player. Explain, what does that mean, a feel player, for those that maybe don't really understand that? Explain a little bit about that and how important, for those that maybe are more of a feel player, that they sort of get in tune with that when getting ready to play.
Well, most players that claim they are a field player, they're the ones that don't like a lot of technical instruction. They sense things through what they perceive as feel, but I have yet to ever meet a field player, because if you don't know what the mechanics are to produce something, how do you know what you're trying to feel? So, but a lot of those players say, this is all based on feel, on touch, and I can agree with touch, but I can't agree on the feel process part of it. So, but to them, Bubba Watson would say that he's the ultimate field player who's never had a lesson. Which may be true or not true. I mean, he played junior golf, so somebody taught him. But at the same token, if you can take a player, and let's say you take the club up to where that it's about 3/4 of the way back, and you move that club 1/8 of an inch one way or the other, if they can feel that, then they'll convince me they're a field player. If they can't, then they're not a field player, because they're not using those senses. What they're feeling is not really a feel, but it's a sense in their mind of where the club or where their body is in space, if you want to use that vernacular. But as far as a true field player, I don't believe there is such a thing. There is such a thing as touch, however, and then if you want to tie that to feel, and you can, but I think they're two separate things, actually.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I always wondered about that myself. I think a lot of times it maybe gets confused. For instance, you always hear some of the players will say, I've just felt that was a good, I felt a good shot, or it didn't feel, the shot didn't feel right. I think I can understand and maybe appreciate that more so than really an overall field player. Pete, I want to bring you just very quickly on this, and then we're going to move on to the next question. Obviously, rhythm and balance is different for everybody. How do we find our sort of rhythm? What somebody that's especially a newer player that's just starting out, how do we sort of tap into that rhythm and find our balance in order to be able to make some good swings that are obviously going to produce some good golf shots? What do we do there, Pete?
Well, for me, it would all start with getting them in a good fundamental posture at address. A lot of players today that I come across, especially the new ones, love to sit back with too much weight on their heels, which is going to put them off balance right at the beginning. And so if you can put them in a good, sound, fundamental posture, and then they can move. One of the things I like to do is when I have a newer player on there, I'll run through some drills where I'll toss some balls at them. I'll have them do some other things where they'll toss them back to me, just to kind of get an idea of what they're doing, what they see, what they feel. And a lot of times, just in a general motion, just let them swing the club and kind of look at what their overall balance is to begin with. But I think from a standpoint, from what I've seen, especially when all the years in the golf schools, we got to see so many people, which is a great way for us to see it. And I think the postures for me is the biggest key. If you can get them started on balance, they'll stay on balance. It's a lot easier to do.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. Great answers, guys. And Bob, if you're listening tonight, which I'm sure you are out in California, I hope that answers a little bit. There's obviously a lot of variations in the senses, and I think you really have to find your which sense. Obviously we're all going to see and that's playing, but you sort of have to find what your rhythm is and what your balance point is, and also you have to sort of explore and open up those sensory areas of feel and touch and that sort of thing, I think, to really understand. So, Bob, thank you for the question, and guys, appreciate the answers. Chuck, I'm going to start with you on this one here, if it's all right. Jeremy up in Michigan, who's I'm sure very busily shoveling snow to get ready for the new season. He asked the question, how does mental attitude affect my physical game?
Well, I can tell you that after years of working with players that are not on the PGA Tour, but on the developmental tours and the old Nike tours, Web.com, Hooters Tour, these guys can flat go out and light it up. They can shoot 64, 65 all day long. They get under pressure under the bigger tournaments, like just going to Q school for the PGA Tour.
Yep.
You go to Q school, and now what happens is they can't control the mental part of their game, which now translates into their physical issues. I mean, some of them actually get sick. They go out and they throw up before a round or in the middle of a round, and they just can't control their nerves. So, having a bad mental game or bad mental thoughts can certainly disturb you physically. I mean, I've seen players that got so mentally disturbed, with their mental game that they would just shake, if they're standing out in 20 below zero weather. So, having the bad, either a really bad mental attitude or not having a strong mental attitude can certainly hinder them physically.
Yeah, and I think we saw a little bit of that in this past weekend's Honda Classic. I think we saw a little bit of that breakdown, and obviously, if it's going to, I think this is what people have to understand. The general public, I'm speaking of now. Obviously, if the tour players are going to have that happen, despite the years of practice and dedication to their craft, it sort of behooves me to understand how the average amateur isn't going to struggle with those same issues. And I can't. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series, guys, was, and I particularly wanted to start up with the mental side of things and get some of these questions in, is because we're getting ready, really, for those particularly up in the northeastern part of the United States and even in the Midwest, where you're dealing with some colder climates and that. We're not quite into the full-fledged golf season yet. Now is a good time to really be getting ready. And I think the first thing that you need to do, I mean, it's great to be practicing the swing and it's great to be practicing some of your fundamentals and that, but I think you also have to mentally start preparing yourself for the season that's coming up. And I think a lot of people don't do that, and they get out there and right away they have a few negative experiences, and it just sort of sets the tone for the season. So, it's very evident to see, obviously at the tour player level it happens, but obviously it's going to happen more often in the amateur level. And I think that the more that we can prepare ourselves mentally, the better we're going to be in the long run. Gary,
I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Gary can add to this as well, because when you're talking about the mental state of somebody's game, it's also to the effect that it creates anxiety. Now, when you create anxiety, then that trickles down into the physical part of it.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Gary?
I actually do a few things. You can change your brain chemistry. It just takes a while. And what I recommend doing for students is starting, especially like you said in the Northeast, is starting now. We utilize in our private coaching programs and our online programs, we utilize a bunch of different teaching resources, but one of them is basically like a placemat, where I say it's got to be part of your morning breakfast. You write down 5 to 10 key statements about what your attitude is going to be, what your mindset is going to be for life on the course and off the course. And you just review them every day, essentially with your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When we first start out, we ask students to do it on the hour, almost like going to physical therapy when you have a real severe back injury or something like that. And we just want you to stay top of mind all the time with your statements. And even these statements, a lot of them are on perspective, because it's one thing to say, I'm a great player, or I will hold my putts, or sort of get your psychological mobile up there so you can read it all the time. But it's another thing to also put things in perspective and make sure that you're saying things. As an example, I'm blessed and fortunate to play this game. You realize that you're not walking 5 miles every morning to go get your water. We're not, let's say, a third world situation here. So we try to encourage students to prepare early, change their perspective, keep things top of mind, carry pictures of their children, whatever they need to do to keep things in perspective, but also to keep talking to themselves. And again, close your eyes and talk to yourself, because then it becomes more powerful, and say it with belief. But I think one of the things I'll add, because I will say it eventually, is it's unnatural for folks. You have to talk to yourself repeatedly and often, and you almost feel at first like you're a little bit you're in therapy almost. But you have to really do it on the hour or frequently, and more than you might think you need to, and you have to keep doing it for that brain chemistry to change.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that. One of the other things that I want, this comes into our next question here. Tina B. From Boston, Massachusetts asked this. Another golfer up there in the Northeast that's waiting for things to thaw out a little bit. And while she waits, we're going to help her with her problem. Her biggest problem, she says, is relaxing over the golf ball, and I think we've all heard that at least a million times. She wants to know, how do you do that? Now, let me give you an example here, guys, and then Pete, I'm going to start with you this time. Obviously, on the golf course, some of the players out there may use music or something to, a lot of times you'll see them, and I'm not talking about obviously in tournament play, but just in maybe some of the weekend warriors out there may listen to some music or something if they've got their iPod or whatever handy. In order to relax. I can remember years ago some of the more seasoned tour players like Fuzzy Zeller, Mark McCumber, a lot of times were often heard by some of their opponents whistling as they were going in between shots. So, Pete, what are some things that maybe Tina can do, and obviously those that are listening into the program, that sort of help? That's a big problem for a lot of golfers, especially amateur golfers, is sort of feeling relaxed over the golf ball. So what are some things that they can do to help relax them?
Well, I think one of the things I like to tell all my players, I said, the ball's not going to go anywhere until you hit it, so there's no reason to get all worked up. It'll stay there until you actually strike at it. So, take your time at the beginning to get yourself set. But I think in many cases, I like to ask them, what types of things help you to relax, or where do you feel most at ease? And is it reading a book? Is it listening to music? Is it just sitting for a few minutes? And if those are the things that make you relax, then you need to do those before you come to practice, before you come to play. Get yourself in a situation that you're comfortable with that helps you to relax, to get you started first. And then, when you get to practicing, you try to incorporate a few of those things in those fields with you. But, it can be, when you were talking about anxiety and nerves and all those types of things, for a lot of players that don't hit it very well, that doesn't take very long.
No.
They get anxious pretty fast. But I think when you really can give a player, and what we always try to do with Plain Simple Golf and with the PSG circuit, we try to give them a total understanding of why they do what they do, so that there's never any questions, so that any time they hit a shot that they hit, they're going to know exactly why it is. And I think that helps to ease the anxiety a little bit, because now they have a better understanding of what they're doing, and it makes it a lot easier for them to fix it themselves and get a little bit more under control. But I think from the beginning, if you can put yourself in some sort of state that helps you relax, whatever that might be, do a little of that first, and then move into that. I know when I played, I talked all the time, because talking to me always helped me relax. And if I had two players that didn't talk, like the guys are saying, I'd talk to myself. I didn't have any problem. At least I would listen. So I'll talk to myself all the time, but I'm not going to change what I'm doing, because that's going to help me play my best and to relax. So if there wasn't anybody else to talk to, I'd talk to the clubs, the trees, the squirrels, anything just to keep me moving. That's what helped me the best. So if they can find something like that helps them, I think it'll be a very advantageous for them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny that you mentioned that about, talking a lot out there. That brings to mind, of course, somebody that I've mentioned a number of times on the program, but Lee Trevino was like that. It wasn't, obviously some of the talking he did was to, a lot of times he was accused of, that was just to sort of mix up his opponents, but really it wasn't. It was a way of releasing nervous energy that he had built up and make him at ease, and he was just somebody that was his outlet. Some people might listen to music, some might whistle or look around or what have you, but Lee liked to talk and liked to engage in conversation out there, and it wasn't always necessarily to to mix up his opponents. It was a lot of times, as I said, to release some of that nervous energy that he had. Gary or Chuck, do you want to add to that before I move on to the next question? Or
I think we covered it pretty good, Gary, don't you?
I really like what Chuck said, or excuse me, what Pete said about talking about the why. And the one thing I would add is you will become less anxious when you are extremely prepared and you really know what you're doing. So that can help you too.
Well done, guys. Gary, I'm gonna actually skip one question and go to this one because I want you to start off with this one here. I think this is going to be right up your alley. Scott from Toronto, Canada, wrote in and he said, "Are there any mental techniques I can use to help me make a shot rather than miss it?" Obviously, as we were just talking about, a lot of distractions. Yeah, another $1 million question. A lot of distractions on the golf course. So the biggest one is probably your own inner voice that tells you, whether you're going to miss the shot or make the shot. So, Gary, expand a little bit on that and maybe just explain for the listeners. Obviously they're not going to make every shot out there, but what are some things? Obviously, that internal voice sometimes gets going and kind of boggles everything up. So what are some things that you're incorporating through MTS and just your general philosophy?
Sure. Generally speaking, I like to coach a style called Mind Technique Synergy. The idea being very simple, that you can't sit around on a couch eating potato chips and just visualize and envision your game all day. It's not all mental. You also can't just pound millions of golf balls and expect that you're just going to have the technique side. You need to kind of put them together and gel them together. Right? It's really a performance coaching type thing. So I like the student to have, this is sort of what we do in detail, but to have what I would call a detailed routine. And routine really is not my favorite word because it implies so much rigidity, but I like to have them be able to have something that works for them, and we figure out how to do that, because typically, especially with amateurs, what we're doing is we're making technical adjustments to their golf swings, and then they have to go back to their life where they're spending, the majority of their time with their family or work or other hobbies as well, and they're not able to implement changes with the veracity as, say, a tour pro does. So, long story short, if we can get that student knowing that, for example, they went in to rehearse their golf swing, whatever they're working on technically, away from the ball a few times. Once again, eyes open first, maybe eyes closed second, and then just get in there and hit it real quick. They're going to kind of keep their connection from their mind and their body. That would be an example. Another example would be to make sure that they're responding to all their golf shots by just saying next shot. So many shots are ruined when you want to hit a good shot. They're ruined because you still haven't turned to the page. So there's some things you can do, I think, to both learn techniques, to take physical golf lessons, to learn how to hit the sweet spot more, but you also need to know how to apply it. And so, like I said, one example is think away from the ball, and then when you get in there, just play. So there's the quickest I can give you without an hour seminar.
Right, and that's an excellent point. Something too that you sort of alluded to there, and I just want to just sort of touch on very quickly. I think one of the things that a lot of amateurs do too is, when they're playing it around, they've maybe hit a bad shot, and all the way up to their next shot, they're replaying that in their mind, or even if they've hit a good shot, they're not sort of taking time to sort of smell the roses in between shots. They're getting so focused. And I remember on the other program I do Tuesday morning, Cindy Miller and I co-host together, and she talked about in one of her segments, Own Your Game, that even Annika Sorenstam used to complain sometimes about how she would get too focused on the shots at hand in between shots, that her mind would get so clustered, and do that for 4.5 hours just mentally is very draining. And she realized that in between, sometimes she just had to think about stuff other than the shots at hand until she actually got up and was ready to play that next shot. So sometimes it was like taking a breather, I guess was the best way to put it. Do you agree with that, guys? Is that something that I think more players need to do at the amateur level especially?
Yeah, we stress that a lot with our players, and it goes back to, Hogan said that the most important shot of the day is the shot at hand. And so all your focus needs to be on that shot. And, if you you can program yourself. So you come to a hole if you've played many times and you always play that hole poorly. When you come to that hole, the last thing you want in your mind is, oh boy, here's number 7. I hate this hole, because your brain's going to just overload on that. So just focus on the shot that you have at hand, and then relax between the shots, like Donica was talking about, because you're going to be out there for 4.5, 5 hours, and that is a lot of stress and pressure to try to stay up there and stay in that state of mind, so to speak. So between shots, you just got to relax, and whether it's talking like Trevino did or humming to yourself, whatever it is, you got to go to a different place. Then put your game face on when it comes time to get ready to hit the shot.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, a lot of the pros, obviously by fact that Annika was number 1 in the LPGA for many, many years, and obviously somebody at her caliber periodically ran into that problem, and it wasn't until some years later, really, in her career, that she came to realize that was a problem for her, that she was getting too focused on the shots all the time, and it was just to the point that it was actually not only putting more pressure on herself, but it was just not allowing her to sort of clear her mind when she needed to. So I think that's something, and Scott, again, I hope you're listening, but those are some things that Gary touched on, and Chuck as well, to really prepare yourself, to help you make those shots as opposed to missing them. Chuck, I want to zip back to you here for a second on this question here. This is Donnie from Shreveport, Louisiana. This is more of a pre-shot routine question. Can you tell me ways to keep the same swing thoughts in my setup? So in other words, when he's getting ready to execute those shots and he's going through his routine, he's looking, can you help him find some ways to sort of keep those pre-shot routines the same?
Well, I'm with Gary on I don't like the word routine, because that would emulate that every single swing you're going to make is going to be exactly the same, and that doesn't happen because you have different lies, different kinds of circumstances. It takes zero athletic ability to look as good as any tour player at address, and most people are really sloppy in their address and in their pre-shot getting ready to hit a shot.
Right.
So I would spend most of my time in my pre-shot, once I've visualized, decided what lie is, the club, and all those things that affect it. When you get set up to the ball, and Ernie Els is a perfect example. You watch him get set up, and he will sit there, it seems like inordinately a long time, going through his knee flex and everything else, getting ready before he pulls the trigger. But he's not going to pull the trigger until he's ready to do so. So that's involved in your setup. So make sure that you set up based on the shot that you want, that you're trying to create, and then from there you just have to swing the club. You can't be thinking about what you want to do in the process of doing it. All that has to be done prior to making that shot.
Right. Yeah, very, very well said. Gary or Pete, do you need to add anything to that? Or?
Well, I think that was a great explanation on it. One of the things we used to use all the time in Jacob's schools was, John always called it GASP, G-A-S-P, grip, aim, stance, and posture. Those are things that are done before you hit it. And so those can be easily learned. And so you can find yourself a little routine to put yourself into a position to hit the shot that you're trying to hit. And I think if you can use that in a setup that's going to give you what you're trying to do. I think it's important to always look at the shot. What are you trying to do, and how can I best set up to make that happen?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very, very well said. Pete, I'm going to let you take this question to lead on this question here. This is from Brandon over in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So we're moving a little bit further south here in our geographic area. And his biggest problem is not being consistent. He says here he can hit a couple of great shots and then miss the next one. How can he be more consistent? So he's looking for more consistency. As many golfers out there will hit a couple of great shots or maybe even have a couple of great holes, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. How do we help him in being a little bit more consistent? What are some of the things that he can do to help?
Well, first of all, I think from an overall preparedness standpoint, always taking yourself through a process of what am I trying to do here? What situation am I up against, and what shot am I trying to hit? And I think if you can always put it in that perspective of what you want to get done, I think it helps you to prepare yourself to hit the next one so you don't get so far off from what you're trying to do. And I think a lot of times, too, when you get in a situation like that, for example, you've seen it happen time and time again. A guy steps up on the first tee, slices it off out of bounds to the right, and before doing anything else, he just puts another ball down and slices the next one right next to the other ball. And, what I always tell him to do, I said, well, first of all, I would have put that club away because obviously it isn't working. So you want to put yourself into a different situation, step away from it, grab a different club. I always like to say, if push comes to shove and you have to hit a shot, what club are you going to use that's going to make it happen? So if you are struggling, it may not get you all the way to where you want to get to, but take something out that you're confident with, that you know you can hit, and ease yourself back into playing a little bit more. But I think it's always looking at what are you trying to do first? What am I up against? What shot am I trying to hit? And how am I going to arrange myself to achieve it? And I think if you can always put yourself in that sort of mindset, I think it helps to eliminate so many of the bad shots in a row that can jump up and get them.
Pete, when I was listening to you here, when you talked about going on the first tee and slicing the first and even their provisional shot into the woods there, it made me think, with so many struggling courses out there over the last few years, I was thinking of a great business model, as you could have somebody standing out there off to the right and all of those Pro V1s that they just sold in the pro shop. I'm sure many groups have sliced them over there. They could resell them as brand new and nobody would ever know the difference because there isn't enough scuffs or anything on the balls. And it's so true. But no, excellent point. I'm just having some fun here. But it's so true. I mean, you'll see people. Some of these golfers out there, guys. You get out there and you hit a bad shot and regroup. Don't sit there and just like a rapid fire machine gun and just get out there and belt. Put some thought into it. This is when the mental side kicks in. This is something interesting. I just want to point out real quick, and then the other Gary and Chuck, if you want to chime in on it as well. One of the things that Nicklaus was famous for, and we all know that Nicklaus wasn't the best ball striker out on tour, and he certainly wasn't the best chipper, or even certainly was a fantastic putter. But overall, he was not, certainly as far as his physical game, the best on tour. But he was able to put it together, and mentally he was able to recover when he did hit a bad shot. And this is something that the amateurs, I just think, struggle with all the time, is they get out there and just like Pete, as you indicated, they get on that first tee and they'll slice the ball off, and before even putting any thought to, they've already pegged that next ball into the ground, and the same thing happens again, and they're scratching their head for the next 3 holes wondering why that's happened. Gary, do you want to expand on that just a little bit on what Pete said, and maybe just explain what the amateurs need to understand in preparing themselves for coming out there this year?
Sure. Well, I think this is another one of those day-long seminars you could do. I'll focus on a couple key points. I think people in general tend to confuse consistency with perfection.
Right.
And they're a little bit unrealistic with it in general. So that's the first thing, is give yourself a little break. That's one. I guess secondly, it really helps if you want to become more consistent. Firstly, you need to know the ball flight laws. I think it's important to know what makes the ball fly and what makes it work. And it certainly doesn't hurt to hit the center of the face more to become more consistent. There's a very strong technical component to this game and a skill component. And if you're all over the club face and you don't understand your golf swing a little bit, I don't really think consistency is that attainable. And so I'll use the slicer as an example. That slicer needs to get some lessons and learn how to create a different flight. And then that way, and then it becomes a little bit of a seesaw. Maybe that slicer learns how to get some sort of a right to left flight. It might actually overdo it at times, and they know how to go back the other way and be able to help themselves and empower themselves. So I think that the technical component is actually pretty responsible for consistency. Also, like I said, then not confusing consistency with perfection, and then just being yourself, being consistent. Consistency is not really a goal; it's a process. And if you learn to be consistent in how you prepare for your round and your shots, how you prepare your mind, how you react to your shots, how you just say next shot and get over it, things like that will help you. So it's all the above. It's just like I said, we could talk about this for a long time.
No, I know. Great answer, though, Gary. Thank you. Chuck, sure. I'm going to let you handle this young lady from down in South Florida, Barbara, and she has her question here. She says, I feel that I'm a very positive person living her life, making decisions. However, golf seems to elude her and brings out sort of the negative thoughts, which certainly prevents her from playing as well as she feels she can. How can she gain confidence in her game? What are some things that she can do to help lift up that confidence level?
Well, it's going to start with what part of the game she's trying to be confident in, whether it's just the whole game or whether it's certain pieces. But, part of it is we're just talking about consistency. Well, every golfer is consistent.
Sure.
If you look at their swings, 9 out of 100, 99 of them are going to look exactly the same. So they have a plane that they're swinging on. They have things that they do every single time. The key is making those things better. So if you make all these good swings, but the ball goes in a lot of different directions, then you need to focus on the two elements that change that. And that's the path the club head is swinging on and the angle of the club face related to that path. So, and I forget who told me this, but it was years and years and years ago when they were talking about when they got loosened up to play in a tour event, they would go and they would before they went to the first tee, the last thing they would do is they'd set up a series of 3-inch putts, and they would hit the putt so that there's no way to miss it. Listen to the sound of it going in the hole. So then when they got to the first tee, they had a positive image and a positive sound in their head of that ball going in the hole. So when they got on the green, they probably are not going to have a 2-inch putt. Let's say they have a 10-foot putt. But they've heard that sound over and over and over. So you want to put in those positive things, and I would start from the shortest strokes and start working them back and get your positive thoughts on that. Start with the putt, then go to the chip and the pitch. And again, when you get to the full swing, if the ball's going everywhere, you're making the same swing, but what you're not doing is controlling the club face the same way every time. So learn how to control that club face, and it'll be much, much easier.
Yeah, and very well said, Chuck. Thank you. The other thing too is just to give you an example. A lot of players fall into that trap where they'll get out there and they don't have any sort of positive imagery. They don't take that with them. They're already thinking about last weekend when they were playing in the foursome and Bob ended up winning and Sam lost the money and so made some bad shots over here, and already they're it's like carrying suitcases to the golf course. They've already got their bad memories, their bad thought process packed up in their luggage, and they're bringing it to the golf course for this weekend. And I think that they've got to sort of clean the slate, and they've got to, as you said, Chuck, they've got to start building some positive memories and positive thoughts going in there so that when they get out on that golf course, as you said, even if it's something, a simple drill like that, sinking some 3-inch putts just to hear that sound of the ball going into the cup, take that even though they're not starting off on the green, just taking that sort of positive imagery and positive sounds with them out on the golf course as opposed to what happened last Sunday, in their foursome. And I think that's something that they need to do. Gary, I want you to I think, is it Gary or Pete? I think it might be Pete's turn here. Pete, let me jump this to you then. Sam in San Antonio, Texas writes in. We've had this question before on here, but I want to approach it a little bit differently. We've all heard this before, I'm sure 1,000 times at least. How can I hit the ball so well on the range, be confident, and then play poorly on the course? And that Pete, that sort of alluded to what you were just talking about, going to that first tee and having that jitters. What are some things, in addition to practicing in that mentally that we can do to sort of break that cycle? What are some things mentally that you think we could do to sort of break that?
Well, one of the first things I tell all my players is the driving range is part of the golf course. I don't know where you're going from the range to the course. I mean, you're still on the golf course. It's part of the golf course. So you have to feel like you're still on the course when you go from one to the other. I think, there's no consequences on the range. So, if you hit a few bad ones, there's 50 more sitting there. So I think one of the things you can do is, I used to take the bucket and I'd take it away from them and I'd toss them one at a time. And I said, all right, now we're going to hit this one shot. I want you to picture out, hole number 6 and we're hitting into the green. What are we doing here? Give yourself a little bit more realistic, playing situations while you're on the driving range to sort of settle you into what you're going to be seeing. And, one of the things I used to do that I'll always, took a lot of our participants by surprise is, the last 5 or 6 shots I'd hit on the range would be with a driver, and it was only to see if I could use it that day. If I'm hitting a crooked on the range, I'm pretty much going to hit a crooked off the first tee when the nerves come in. So I would make sure that I could hit something off the tee that I had some confidence in, that I could put it in the fairway. Just because it has a 1 on the bottom doesn't mean it's the first one you hit.
Yeah.
You have to get yourself set up that you put yourself in a more comfortable situation. But I think if you can play the range a little bit more like it is part of the course, it'll help you.
Yeah, and that raises a great point too. That a lot of people, and Pete, you talked about this a little bit back earlier in one of the earlier questions as well, about getting to that first tee and slicing the ball into the woods here. I think it's a good idea sometimes if you aren't not hitting a club particularly well on the range and you don't feel you have a lot of confidence. That's not the club you want to start with on the first tee. A club that you're not hitting very well. That's something that you work out at a later point when you're back on the range or when you're with an instructor and you're taking your next lesson. Work out some of those bugs there. But I think a lot of people end up making that mistake. They think, well, I'll straighten it out maybe after a couple of holes. Chuck, that's something I know that you've seen working with some amateurs over the years. What do you try to do to discourage players, even some top players that maybe aren't playing at their best with a particular club? Do you try to discourage them and say, or encourage them rather to sort of put that club in the bag they're in the next round, or what do you do?
Well, they can have a club that they don't like. Obviously, if you ask somebody if they have a favorite club and they tell you what it is, then obviously they have the rest of them that are not their favorites. But I can tell you that there is a college coach who's quite successful that played on the Ben Hogan Tour and won 3 times. And when he went to take his PAT for the PGA of America, he went out and twice failed his PAT, which is pretty hard to do. I mean, you only have to shoot 75.
Right.
And so after each one of those, I'd say, well, what happened? He goes, well, I hit driver here, and I did this, I did that. So the third time he went out, we took his driver and his 3-wood out of his bag, unbeknownst to him. He got out on the course with no driver and 3-wood, and he shot 13 under that day. So
wow.
Sometimes you just have to take it out of their hand. But if they have a club they're not hitting particularly well, sometimes it can be technique, and sometimes it can be that club just flat doesn't fit them. And what we see more and more with all of our players, whether they're seniors or whether they're juniors, is the drivers just flat don't fit them. The companies make them too long. We've had a lot of success in looking at swing speed and then cutting a driver down or reshafting a driver to a length that's best for that swing speed. Now they hit it in the middle of the face and they're controlling it much better. So, but if a player is having problems there, you got to take it out of their hands and say, dude, if you're hitting this 280 and it's in the woods, why don't you hit your 3-wood, 250 and keep it in the fairway? And,
right.
And we don't really have a lot of people that say they don't want to do that. But then we'll also, like I said, we'll look at their club, we'll fit them, make sure it's a club that fits them, and if it doesn't, then we have to get something in our hands that does.
Very well said, and I agree with that. I think that a lot of times, you'll see students out there, and they're just struggling with certain clubs in their bag, and it's to the point where they have little or no confidence in those clubs anymore. Sometimes you might have to take it out and substitute something else in there. If you're, a lot of players don't obviously use long irons that much anymore. They've all sort of switched over to hybrids. But for those of you that are struggling, even with your, fairway wood, if that's something, club that you're not hitting well, drop down to maybe one of the hybrids and see how you play with that and try that out in the range. Because, a lot of your hybrids, you can still get some good distance. I mean, everybody's been so jazzed up here in the last couple of decades, really, about hitting it, as far as they can and getting, as one of you alluded to earlier, hitting it 280 yards. Well, it's great if you can hit it 280 yards, but if it's in the woods, it's not going to amount to much.
Right.
So it's better to hit it 235 yards or 240 yards even if you can straight and or as best you can down in the fairway than hitting it 280 or 290 and being somewhere off in the wild blue yonder and not being able to find your ball half the time. So some great advice, guys. Gary, I want you to tackle this one here. It's a very simple question. We've sort of been alluding to it here, but I'd like you to really share some thoughts. Tim from Chattanooga, Tennessee, poses this question: what is a good thought to have when teeing off in the first hole? Obviously, relaxing and maybe some breathing techniques, but let's try and help Tim here with some good thoughts. He's just come from the practice range. He's hit a few shots out there. How do we set him up for success right from the get-go?
Firstly, I recommend knowing the hole before you get there. You should have pretty much a target and a club already picked out that makes sense, that works. Mm-hmm. So if you're prepared properly, that will help you then practice properly over there on the range. Before you hit the range, you should really go from the range to the course in stride. You should play the last few shots on your range, whether with that club you're going to use, or play a couple mock holes, going through your system pre-shot and getting yourself positively wired with that one ball. I don't remember if Chuck or Pete said that, but you play the one ball type as opposed to hitting the whole bucket. So if you feel like you're prepared, again, based on practicing the right way for that shot, knowing where you're going with that shot, and just hit it in stride. It's when you tell yourself, again, it goes back to perspective. The value of the first tee shot is the same as the value of all the others. And you have to just remind yourself of that. So, I understand that socially our golf shop overlooks the first tee. I understand that socially that's a little more intimidating. We're all looking out the window.
They don't know that.
Right, exactly.
They do now.
Those are some of the techniques I would use, and just you can work on your breathing and things like that as well. Another one that comes to just entered my mind is, typically if you are the type to get a little more nervous, you're probably going to grip that club just a little bit more tightly than you normally would. So let's just say, I'm using a random number. Let's just say your grip pressure is normally, say, a 6 out of 10. You're probably going to be a 7 or an 8 when you become nervous. And so you need to feel like you're gripping at about a 4 or a 5. Just back that off a little bit. So all those things can add up, and any one or all of those together.
Yeah, and again, well said. Guys, I'm going to wrap up with this last question here. I think this is a perfect one to sort of it sort of encapsulates what's really been going on here in golf for several years now. And I think we've all experienced this one way or the other. But George from Miami, we're really gotten south now. He writes in. He's a senior, and he says, "How do I recapture my passion for golf?" And let me just explain you a little bit what he's talking about. He's obviously played for many, many years, and his game, he struggles all the time, and it's just a constant up and down journey. And he's just really lost a lot of that steam and that enjoyment. And I think number one, I think we really as an industry have to start emphasizing about getting out there and having fun. And I think a lot of times students, and it's not really anyone's fault, but I think it's just the industry has really pushed a lot, I think, over the years, both from the equipment side and even, I think, to some degree with the teaching side, about sort of that looking for that perfect swing or that perfect way of approaching things. And I think it's actually, in some ways, for some, has worked negatively against the industry. I think what's happened is a lot of people have gotten out there, they're just not having fun anymore. It's too complicated. It's not easy. And we certainly know golf has never been easy, but it's just they're losing that sort of spark. So, Chuck, I'm going to throw you under the bus first on this one, so I apologize. Okay. But how do we help George get out there and sort of recapture some of that passion?
Well, if it's becoming too hard and too technical, then things just go back to what you feel comfortable doing. I mean, everyone has a threshold at their current level. So if trying to get better becomes too technical and you're not having fun, then go back to what you were doing when you had fun. I mean, if you think about this, all of us that played golf when we were young, and it relates to putting, we'd go up and we would hit it. We wouldn't walk around the hole 10 times and look at everything. We'd look at a hole, we'd get up there and we'd hit it. We might knock it 4 feet past. We'd go up and we'd make that 4-footer. So you putt like you're a kid, and it's the same analogy as dance like nobody's watching. You may be the world's worst dancer, like Elaine was on Seinfeld, but she had fun, So the key is go back to how you played when you were having fun. And I can tell you, just because you're a guy doesn't mean you have to play from the tips. Go up to a tee that you can actually play from and enjoy the game. We stress that a lot, with our players. I mean, we've got guys that are my age, 65, and I say, guys, why are you all the way back here? Well, this is where everybody plays. Yeah, but you're not playing. You're not having any fun back here. Move up where you can at least play the course how it's designed.
Yeah.
You've lost 30 yards in the last 30 years. You haven't gained 30, so you need to go up to where you can accommodate that. But that's what you got to do. You just go out and play like you did when you were a kid, or when you first started, when you had fun. And as much as we want to see everybody improve, there comes a time as coaches, when players they don't want to spend the time. And we've talked about this before on the show. That everybody wants to get better, but they don't want to spend the time. Well, if you don't want to spend the time, you're probably not going to get better. So what you have to do is find a way to still play and enjoy the game.
And that's something that that's a fantastic point and series of comments that you made. But just to sort of further go on that, if you look at players like Nicklaus and of course Palmer, as they got sort of towards, they're still playing, of course, but Nicklaus said himself, he said, I don't want to be out here if I don't feel like I'm competitive. That doesn't mean he wants to stop playing golf altogether, but and Palmer was the same. There comes a point in time when you have to realize that you're not going to shoot 64 or 65 or 75 anymore. You may be shooting 80. You may be shooting 85. So take the pressure away. You're not going to shoot what you necessarily did, when you were 20. You're not going to hit it as far as you did maybe when you were 20 years old. Equipment can certainly help to a point. Certainly some sound fundamentals and some lessons here and there. But as we get older, it's just a reality that we're going to lose some of that distance. We're going to lose some of that accuracy. Our vision isn't as good as it used to be. So there is going to be some changes. So adapt accordingly, but get out there and have some fun. And George, if I was, advising you, that's what I would do: is get out there and have some fun. Gary,
and the other thing too to go hand in hand with that is if you're a 15 handicapper. Okay, your par is not 72. Your par is 87. So go out and have some fun. You go out and still telling yourself, "Oh, I was 15 over par," And you shoot 86. You shot one under your par because your handicap's 15. So
right, exactly.
That puts a little different light on it. But again, I would encourage move up in the tees because that's going to make it a lot of fun. Out at Gold Canyon one year. We were out there, and there was 2 guys came in. They were snowbirds. They came in, and they went all the way to the back tees.
Oh, I know.
And as you watch them loosening up, they lost 63 balls on the front side between the 2 of them. And I kept telling them, I go, guys, you'll have a lot more fun if you'll move up. Oh no, we're going to play all the way back here.
Yeah.
Fine. They had a terrible day. They hated it.
Yeah, and I can just imagine as I said earlier to you, Pete. I said I'd love to be on the course there and gathering some of those golf balls up, and I'd probably make a killing selling them on the side of the road with some of these guys. It's just crazy sometimes, when you see people just do things like that. And it's more often you see this with the guys. It's an ego thing. They don't want to give up that. Ego, and they just want to get out there, and they think they can still play. And to be honest, a lot of them could never play from the tips anyways to begin with, even in their heydays. So why start now when you're 65, 75, and even 85? So great comment, Chuck. Guys, we just got a moment or two left. It's hard to believe this hour's already zipped by. I want to give each of you an opportunity, and Gary, I'm going to start with you. Actually, no, Pete, I'm going to start with you, Pete. Just let everybody know a little bit about how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about what you're doing, and then we'll go Gary, and then Chuck will let you finish off. Pete,
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Ted. It's plainsimplegolf.com. The plain is Plane. I wanted to just talk just a brief bit where you were talking about, having more fun on the golf course. It's, if they can hit it better, they're going to have more fun. So, one of the things we did with one of the things you're going to see when you go onto the website is the SSR. We try to take all the thought process and make it more simple, so you're not thinking so much about what's going on. You're just making swings. And that's one of the things I think that'll help them. If they hit better shots, it's always more fun. So if you're struggling, get some help. I mean, there's a lot of great people out there that can help you with it to make it easier. But yeah, it is plainsimplegolf.com. Everything that we have is out on the website between all the programs that we do, so they'll be able to find everything out there.
Fantastic. And Gary?
Sure. GaryOkinoGolf.com, GaryOkhinogolf.com. You have all sorts of deliverables there. You can get your Fix Your Game Now assessment that gets you a bunch of free videos. I am in the process, within about a week, of launching an online coaching program. I have a very successful coaching program for in-person. People are welcome to come and travel and see me, or locally. But I'm also launching an online version of that called Your Last Golf Lesson Ever. That will be interesting for folks, so keep on the lookout there. Again, GaryOkinoGolf.com.
Fantastic, Gary. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Chuck Evans.
Yeah, you can go to chuckevansgolf.com. You can read all about what we do and see all of our different programs there. We have 3 facilities here in Kansas City and looking to add a few more. We do traveling schools as well, and then we'll be launching the new Golf Channel Academy. It's called Golf Academy Masters Week that you see on TV. So, we do our basic thrust is player development. We do a ton of junior player development as well as adult, but anything you can think of golf-wise, we do. So.
Well, that's what I want to hear. I love, as we all do, I love golf and love talking about golf, and I always, having you guys on the show here, it helps me improve not only my game, but my teaching perspective as well, and always enjoy having your thoughts and input to the program, guys. So Mr. Chuck Evans, Mr. Gary Okino, and, of course, Mr. Pete Buchanan were my special guests tonight on Coach's Corner panel. Thanks, guys, for helping pitch in tonight, and I know that you'll be coming back again on future shows. Thanks, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for your input.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Okay, as I said, that was Mr. Chuck Evans, Mr. Gary Okino, and Mr. Pete Buchanan joining me here on Golf Talk Live on the Coach's Corner panel. And coming up next, who's very patiently waiting here, is my interview guest for the latter half of the program, Mr. Ron Korn. Ron is the head professional at Cedar Hill Country Club up in Livingston, New Jersey, and I know he's got some folks up there in New Jersey, tuning into the program. In addition to being the head golf professional at Cedar Hill, he was also the 2005 New Jersey PGA Teacher of the Year. And just to tell you a little bit very quickly about Cedar Hill, it's a private members club, of course, known for its undulating greens and narrow fairways. So a club right up my alley. I love some of the older style courses. Also, it boasts a full practice range and short game area and has hosted several PGA, NJ, SGA, and MGA tournaments. Ron was also elected to the New Jersey PGA Board of Directors back in 93 and again in 2000, and then served on and chaired several committees while he was there, and was also the section's Horton Smith Award winner back in 96 and again in 97. A great professional. Looking forward to having him on the show, so let me just bring Mr. Ron Korn on the show. Good evening, Ron, and welcome to Golf. I'm doing well. I know you were listening the last little bit of the show. I don't know how much you caught on it, but had a great discussion with three other fellow professionals, and certainly enjoyed helping those out there with the mental game. But how are you doing, Ron?
Good. I enjoyed the show. I listened to it, and let me start by saying I'm a fan of your show, both Coach's Corner and Golf Talk Live, and I'm flattered that you asked me to be on tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know our mutual friend, Mr. Brian Dobby, up there introduced us. And thank you, Brian, if you're listening to the show. And I know that he's been getting the message out there for some of your fellow pros up in the New Jersey area to tune in. And let me just say, before you and I start, Ron, let me just say to any of the professionals out there, PGA, LPGA, what have you, if you're interested in coming on to Golf Talk Live, or if you want to participate in Coach's Corner segment, you're certainly welcome to do so. You can send me an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com, and I'll certainly fit you into the schedule and work you in as best as I can. But I appreciate all that you guys and gals out there do. And ladies, you're welcome as well. It's not this is not just restricted to the guys. Ladies, you're welcome to come out here as well and talk a little golf here on Golf Talk Live. But Ron, let's start off first off. Tell me a little bit about I know that Cedar Hill is a members-only club, but tell us a little bit about the club and some of the things that you're doing up there, and then we'll get into to some questions here.
Well, I'm proud to say I've been the head golf professional there for 25 years. And in a career of good breaks, this was the best break I've ever gotten. And I can't wait to start my 25th season. The month of March in New Jersey is all about new clubs, new clothing, new members, new friends, new flowers, tournaments, so it's all about the start. And our golf course was built in 1921, and we've been renovating it ongoing for the past 6 years or so under a very fine architect named Robert McNeil. Mm-hmm. And over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, we've rebuilt every bunker and tee box. We improved our short game area and built a beautiful new practice green. And what I like is the renovation did not make the course more difficult. It made it more playable.
Right.
And our superintendent of 34 years, Dennis Reed, finds it easier to maintain, and he has many more pin placements on some of our tougher greens that were rebuilt. And then we are also just now completing a clubhouse renovation where every room was redecorated. And the club's going to reopen March 25th with a new feel and a whole lot of excitement. And I'll just tell you one of the many things I appreciate about our membership is they recognize all the good that the game of golf and that a club can do to help people. So our club devotes several of our club tournaments and functions completely to local charities, where the entire entry fee will go to charity. So
Fantastic.
It's one of the many reasons I'm proud to work at Cedar Hill, and I've been there, like I said, starting my 25th year.
Let me ask you, Ron, just I think an obvious question, and I know you've seen this, in the last several years, obviously partially because of the recession that's gone on, but just the change in golf. Obviously, unfortunately, there's been courses out there that have struggled along. What do you think is some of the things that have helped Cedar Hill's success in being able to maintain its membership? And obviously, you're going to lose some here. Unfortunately, people pass on, and you're going to lose that. But what are some of the things that have helped keep Cedar Hill successful and being one of those strong clubs out there still?
Well, we've adjusted. We haven't continued to do things exactly the way we've done it. The club has evolved. I think the original country club plan is kind of a dinosaur where, members spend the entire day there. So we've done things. We've moved the tee times up. We've improved the pace of play. We get kids to tee off earlier. We've made more tee times available for people and earlier tee times. And my superintendent's part of that, getting the course ready earlier. So it's a big team effort to adjust because we did things different when I first got there. When I first got there, it was a place to spend the entire day. And I don't think a lot of people are looking for that now. So the world's sped up. The world's sped up since I've gotten there. So we've done a good job, I think, of adjusting.
Yeah, and so true. And I think what if I understand what you were saying, I think the mentality for a long time in the golf industry particularly was sort of that analogy of, open our doors and people will come. And that was fine, in an earlier time. But as the world has evolved and moved forward and as you said, sped up, obviously courses have to adjust. and have to sort of assimilate, if you will, to more modern times. And I think what's happened with a lot of courses, and I certainly see it down here in the South, of course, being in Florida, one of the things that I've seen a lot happen is sort of grappling on to that old way of thinking. And I'll give you a good example. I had a guest on here a few weeks ago who is the digital communications manager. You probably know him through social media, Ricky Potts. He's out with Troon Golf. They're out in Arizona. And he talked about, he said, one of the things that he really tries to do is being active out in the community, out in the golf community, talking to other people in golf, whether it be teachers and instructors, coaches, players, what have you, keeping active and keeping that brand and keeping it alive out there. And I think one of the problems with some of the more traditional country clubs in the past is, or happening now rather, is that they've sort of stayed in that mode, if you will. And what's happening is the memberships have moved on or have faltered away for one reason or another. Right. So it's great that your organization, your club, has recognized that, hey, we need to keep up with the times. We have to be forward thinking in how we approach things. And it's not, in addition to obviously some great renovations that you're excited about doing, you've had to do some other things in order to keep membership interested in being active.
Yeah, the entire staff is sensitive to it. I mean, my lesson book was a lot more structured when I started. Now, we'll do lessons nearly any time because we know people are a lot busier. So right from the superintendent to the chef to me, the golf pro, to my starter, we've all adjusted, and it's a different model now, and we're doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, and I think another key thing, which there's still some dinosaurs out there. Social media is a huge thing right now. And I think that you have to be engaged, whether the club and also the individuals working at the club have to be engaged in some fashion with social media, whether it's coming on a program like this, whether it's engaging in the groups and things on Facebook or Twitter or what have you. Some people may look at that and say, well, I don't have time for that, or I don't want to do that. Right. But if you're not engaged in some fashion like that, then you're not really considered to be an active player, because people are engaging in those platforms, and we've seen time and time again. Golf is no different. It's a business. It's a game, but it's also a business.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage of how long I've been doing this, I could easily be set in my ways, but I don't resist anything like that.
No, and
not at all.
No, and nor should you. And I think that it's part of the times, it's part of the evolution of society, as you said, but also of the game. And I think that it's great. We're finding some new, different ways of approaching golf, different products coming out there. And I'm not just talking about the equipment, but also different types of forms of golf. I mean, some people are against that. I understand that, but at the same time, you're dealing with a different generation, and the way that some of the golfers and some of the youngsters out there, they want to see things different. They want some change, and if we stick with that sort of status quo all the time, then ultimately what ends up happening is you end up suffering as a result. And kudos to you and the other staff at Cedar Hill for being forward thinkers like that, and I think that's why obviously you guys are still amongst us here.
Thank you.
Ron, let me ask you, now we talked about this in my earlier segment with the guys here, but I want to ask you a little bit about, get into the instruction side of things here and just help some of the listeners out there. We focused obviously on the mental game, but there's also the physical game that has to be molded into that. One of the big problems that we hear all the time, and Pete Buchanan touched on this a little bit in his answer, but one of the things that you see is how do they take their swing from the range to the golf course? People get out in the range and they're hitting some great golf shots there, and suddenly they step up to the first tee and it's like an entirely different person just showed up. What are some of the things that you try to do with your students that help sort of, navigate from the range work over there out into that golf course?
Well, during the lesson we talk about it, because a lot of my lessons is someone getting ready for a round tomorrow or next week. Mm-hmm. And it could be around with their boss or their husband or the club championship. So part of the lesson, part of my lesson is what's going to happen when you get out there. a bad start, a good start. So I try to get them ready for different scenarios out there. And the number one thing that I see is people do extra things on the golf course that they didn't do in front of me. So if during the lesson I've got them, waggling the club once, one look and going, if they turn them into 2 or 3 looks, now it feels too important. So I think playing good golf is knocking down the feeling that it's important. You've got to get it to feel like it doesn't matter. So, and in the lessons you always have another ball, so there's not a big focus on posting the score or the result. So I think that's the number one thing I think is that, the pre-shot routine fluctuates. They focus on the result. Sometimes in the lesson I'll compliment their swing and the result wasn't that good because I like what I saw. So I think that's the number one thing. And I've played tournaments my whole life, and I've fought this at different times, doing extra.
Yeah.
And so I think what I try to send them off with is like a play with a certain phrase and trigger it at the same amount of time. And, but it's inevitable that it's going to feel different. There's people watching on the first tee. All of a sudden now there's comments from the other 3 players, the caddies.
Yeah.
So I try to prepare them that it's going to feel different too. And but I think if they can trigger the shot the way they did in front of me, that's a big part of it. When they're doing extra things, it's starting to feel like it's really, really important.
What's Ron? Let me ask you, why do you think that so many of the amateur golfers or the average golfers, why do you think that they struggle so much with this more so? I mean, obviously the pros have a little different approach to things. They're obviously out there practicing more, and they've got an entourage of really between their instructors and coaches and mental coaches and things like that. But why do you think so many of the average players struggle with that transition so much?
I think they're trying to be perfect, and pros are more realistic. They know their swing's going to come and go.
Yeah.
They know that a bad warm-up might not, be a bad round. So I think pros, believe it or not, sometimes they have lower expectations than the amateurs. And a bad shot doesn't shake them up as much. They really just care where the ball ended up. Where the amateur golfer, cares about a lot of times how he looks in front of his playing partners. When a real good pro will be really just focused on where the ball ended up. So I think what I encourage my amateurs to do is not focus on the result. They've got to try to get their swing to feel like it felt when they were hitting it good. And that's the way I try to play. So if I'm taking a lesson, and I go to Mike Adams, who's, probably the best in the world, and if Mike says something to me and I hit a good shot, the first thing I say is, that felt like my left shoulder went over here. And then I'm playing with that thought. It's not even a numbers thing or an angles thing. It's a feel thing. So I think too many golfers, pros and amateurs, we worry about posting the score and how bad we're going to look and trying to be perfect. And the swing, there's room for error in the swing. You could have a funny feeling takeaway and recover on the way down. There's room for error. I use the phrase more or less a lot of times in the golf swing when I'm trying to get someone to put the club in a certain spot. So I kind of more or less get it over here, because once I've made them a perfectionist, they're not going to play any good. So there is room for error.
Yeah, and if you look back, Ron, in history, and even in today's game, some of the players, and obviously, and I've used his name probably a dozen times at least, Trevino is probably the best example. Trevino certainly didn't have the prettiest looking swing on tour, but the guy was phenomenal when he needed to be there to close the deal, if you will. He was able to do it. And a lot of people could pick apart his swing and say, well, it wasn't, this or it wasn't that. But really it's more aesthetics. It's more, a visual, visually appealing comment, if anything else. But it worked. It was mechanically sound. From the standpoint, he got the club face into impact where he needed it to be, and he put the club onto the ball the right way, and it did what he needed it to do. And very seldomly did you ever hear Trevino complain about, well, I didn't have, my backswing wasn't this, or my follow-through wasn't this.
Yeah.
It was always, I just didn't hit where I needed it to go, and that was it. He didn't put a lot of thought into it, and he went up and he did it the next time. And that's, I think, a difference that you see now on the tour that you didn't see. And I'm not trying to, throw these guys under the bus or anything. I just hear a lot more excuses on the golf course now than you used to hear 15, 20 years ago. Would you agree with that, do you think?
Yeah.
I mean,
that could be some kind of release thing where they're trying not to, maybe trying to stay positive and make a lot of excuses. That could be something like that. But I do hear more.
I mean, you always hear, and I mean, I understand, when you're being interviewed on, after your round on TV and so forth, a lot of times you have to sort of explain away what happened. But I just hear a lot more excuses, and again, it always comes back to sort of the mechanics and so forth. And I think there's been too much emphasis with a lot of especially the top players. I mean, you don't see, and again, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but you don't see players who have a phenomenal swing, great impact. Luke Donald, in the winner's circle every week in, week out.
Right.
There's a lot of great players out there that hit, balls straighter than you could draw a line in the sand, but they're not winning week in, week out. And a lot of that comes back to not so much the swing mechanics or ball striking ability. It comes down to a mental breakdown somewhere where they're not putting it all together. You know what I'm saying? So we want to be able to help. Right, go ahead.
Belief in your swing is more important than your swing.
Exactly.
I mean,
you've got to be.
I think what amateurs do a lot of too is amateurs, they work on little parts. They'll work on a part of the swing, so they don't have emotion. Like if you work on hip clearance, which a lot of people are obsessed with, you'll get really good at hip clearance, but you won't be a good player. You'll just be good at that. And when I'm walking down the range, I can spot someone who's working on a little part, because that's it's so jarring when they get to that part of the swing. When you got to view the swing as a motion. So when I try to teach someone, I might say, you've got to take it more over here, but I'll always follow it up with and then go all the way around to the left. So I'm always trying to relate it to a motion, because I don't want them obsessed with a part. And I think we're all guilty of that sometimes. And everybody's got something in their swing that they're obsessed with. And when you're playing good, you're probably making a motion. When you're playing bad, you're making a series of parts.
My father, when I was growing up, used to say, I played golf. I'm going to be 51 here next week. I hate to say, but I'm getting up there. But when I was about 6 or 7, when I started really playing, I mean, I started a little bit earlier than that to be technical, but before I really started to really play a little bit more, I was probably about 6 or 7. My father used to take me out, and the one thing he always said to me, he said, Ted, if you could take your practice swing and make it your golf swing, he said, you'd be phenomenal. And that was one of the things very early on that really stuck to me, because he said, it would almost be effortless. You would just swing that club, and it would be just everything would be on plane, everything would just be perfect. But then as soon as you got over that ball, all of a sudden, what broke loose, and the club was going this direction, your head was going that direction, and it was just all over the place. And it was just, you would sort of lose that relaxed feeling, if you will, when you step over the ball. And that's something we talked about earlier in Coach's Corner, where, a lot of players have that nervous feeling and uneasy feeling when they're getting up over the ball. So one of the things I think that has really become very popular now in golf instruction is taking the players from the practice tee or range, if you will, and out and instructing them out on the course. Is that something that you're incorporating in your lessons, as well as getting out on the course and doing some real-time instruction that way as well as on the range?
Yeah. I'll have players with a specific hole that they're psyched out on, or a specific shot, and it makes sense to go right to that spot or right to that hole. And then I try to give them a new outlook on the hole or a new outlook on the shot, because they have gotten bogged down by this one hole or this one scenario. So anytime I can take them on the golf course, I think that builds up their confidence. They see it working on the golf course. And I think it also, Ron, I think what it does too is it puts them in sort of a real-time situation. I mean, even though you might, depending on the circumstance, on how you prepared, they may be just hitting that one ball, or you may allow them to hit another ball if it's not in an actual
if you're just doing a hole or two as a part of the lesson. But a lot of times, it's easy on the range to sort of be comfortable because you've got another ball right beside you there to hit again. But when you're playing in an actual hole as though you're normally would play that in a round, suddenly now you've only relying on that one ball, and you don't have four or five other or a dozen other balls there beside you. So now it's almost like a more real-time situation. So this is something that I'm glad that instruction has really started to gravitate to. What are some things that you try to do? Here we are, as you mentioned, you're getting ready to do a relaunch here, if you will, in another week or two. What are some things that you're helping the members get prepared as we move into you being up in the Northeast? Of course, you're still doing a little shoveling, I'm sure. What are you doing to help your members get prepared for this upcoming season?
I seem to give, or I like to give more short game lessons in the spring, because most players are coming to you to hit the ball further.
Right.
So here we are in March and April. It's windy, it's wet, and it's cold. Mm-hmm. And you're bundled up. The ball's not going to go as far as it's going to go in mid-May.
Right.
So I'll try to get the driver out of their hands. I'll try to get the 3-wood out of their hands, because if our range is into the wind, you're losing 30, 40 yards, and anybody would. It's sometimes it's still hard to convince the student that it's the conditions. So I like to, in March and April in New Jersey, it's windy, cold, wet.
Yeah.
So I'll try to go short game, pitching, putting, and pitching. From the pitching swing, I can see, what their issues are. As soon as I see someone pitch the ball, I can see if they're trying to get under the ball too much or they don't finish their swing. So that's what I do in the spring. I try to get off the lesson tee, onto the putting green, onto this little chipping fairway we have. And then, of course, I try to follow my own medicine, because I'll do the same thing. I'll say, why is it going so short? But it's just, our range can be a wind tunnel for the next 2 months. So that's what I try to do, because lessons where someone wants to get longer, those can really go down the wrong road in a hurry. I try to get where the distance is the result, not the goal. Once it's the goal, we're just going to keep swinging harder and harder. So, and sometimes if I improve their pitching, Ted, they'll hit it further when they go to play.
Right.
I've actually seen people where I get them to pitch the ball better, where they're coming in with their hands in front a little bit, and they're taking a divot in front of the ball, and they say back to me, "Are we going to see you hitting it further?" And sometimes I won't tell them why, but it's that short game lesson.
Yeah, exactly. And the short game can cure so many things that people don't realize. There's just so many great techniques that can be developed through having a solid short game, and it all mimics the full swing. One of the things that we all battle in the teaching side of things, of course, is ego, and it's more prevalent, of course, on the and let's be honest, on the male side. We want to grip it and rip it. We've all remember, John Daly when he first hit on the tour, and he would launch that thing 300 yards plus, and we all just sort of, the industry just sort of grappled to that, and it was like, okay, how can we make everybody hit it further? Everybody wanted it. It's like you said, they would all come for a lesson and say, okay, how do I hit it like John Daly? And it was just for the longest time. Now people are starting to realize, and this is something really that a lot of ladies realize very early on, because they know that they don't have the same capacity to be able to hit it in most cases. Now there are some exceptions to the rule, but most cases, more often than not, they don't have the ability to hit it as far as obviously the average guy does. So they were smart, and they sort of learned from the whole back, and that really started, almost a revolution, if you will, in the golf industry, where more and more instruction was being taught from the whole back as opposed to the tee forward. And I think that was a very smart thing to do, and as you indicated, it certainly is going to help get some distance by having those sound fundamentals in the short game. Ron, let me ask you another thing. You brought it up here about talking about some of the parts in the swing. When you get a situation where somebody comes to you with some difficulty in that, do you try to break it down into parts like that, or how do you sort of approach it? Let's say if you come to somebody? Not so much a distance issue, but let's say a part of the swing that you see that's weak. How do you sort of do it? Do you sort of break it up, the swing?
First thing I do is I go to the setup, because the setup can either work against you or work for you. Mm-hmm. It's like the odds. If you have a good setup, you have good odds that you're going to hit a good shot. If you have a bad setup, and the setup is the one thing that I can really control. It's not frustrating for people. They don't start. If I change their setup, they work with me. So you've got to have a good setup. And a good setup is it's different for each person, but you've got to have a setup that works for you. And most of my students don't put any value in the setup. They always say, I think I'm taking it too far inside. I think I'm too quick.
Right.
They never mention that they're sitting to the ball, and that's why the club's going inside, and that's why the grip's so weak, So I got to get them bent over more, strengthen their grip, and the club starts going more up and down. So I think you got to, as a teacher, they've got to leave the tee with a good setup. So before I even tackle anything in the swing, and then I try to fix everything through the club. I try to get the club in the right spot. I don't really use words like turn and hip clearance. I try to get the club in the right spot, and when I put it in the right spot, the body's usually right there with it. So, because I think the emphasis on the amateurs and on TV announcers is how much the person turned, how early cleared his hips, and a lot of numbers and a lot of angles. But if their club's out of position, you've got no chance. So I try to fix everything through the club, and I pretty much strengthen grips all day. I see a lot of weak grips.
Yeah, one of the things.
Yeah,
one of the things, Ron, you touch on a point, and it was mentioned in our coach's corner earlier as well a little bit. But one of the things, unfortunately, that happened, I think, in the industry was there was a lot of emphasis on numbers. There was a lot of emphasis on technique, and it got so much that I think part of the industry, not necessarily say everybody, but some of the industry got kind of away from really the basics of golf, a good setup and things. And it was all about getting into the right position. It was all about, at impact, and all of those things are certainly important. Numbers, and again, I make no bones about this. I'm certainly love a lot of the technologies that's out there, but I'm also careful that we don't get too consumed with that technology to the point where we forget some of the basic fundamentals out there. And sometimes the golfers out there, and I think this adds to the frustration. I had somebody that had written into the program on the last question we talked about, losing passion for golf. How does he regain passion? And George from Miami, and he's a senior. He's played for a lot of years, and he said, I want to know how to get back that passion. And I think what's happened is I think the golfers out there have gotten caught up with all this technology. I mean, I think it's great for the instructors to have access to the information. Yeah. I think they're valuable tools for you and I to have. But I think somewhere along the lines, and I've said this many times, that technology got too much into the hands of the average golfer out there, and I think some of them got overwhelmed with, and their eyes were rolling like slot machines with all of that information, and I think it became where it was no longer fun.
Yeah, if you're new to the game or you've never played the game and you're watching an analyst on TV break down a swing, you could conclude, I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to get in all those positions that he just mentioned. When that golfer on TV might be thinking about his arms and wrists. So, because I know in my swing, I'll watch my swing on video and I'll say, wow, it's a good shoulder turn. Oh, look, the hips cleared, my knees separate a little bit. But I'm thinking about my arms and wrists. Anytime I've tried to think about much other than where my arms and wrists need to be, I lose the strike of the ball at the bottom. It doesn't have that strike. So I think you could, and of course a TV analyst, he has to do that. He's
sure.
He can't say this guy plays great because he takes a little inside and hits out to the right a little bit. I mean, he's got to be interesting. He's got to be interesting. But I could see a new golfer or a person who hasn't taken up the game that say, I didn't understand a word of that, and I'll never be able to get in that position. That it's like that, like to hold the angle. I don't really know of any good player that does that intentionally.
No.
But when an amateur sees a still photo of somebody with a late hit, they go down the range and start working on a late hit.
Yeah.
But the late hits can be involuntary from a lot of other good things. So I think I think you're right. It can get to where it's like you're in a science class that's going over your head. That's not going to help you anyway.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want anybody to misunderstand, because I know there's a lot of coaches out there, and we've all, if you've been active on Facebook and that, you see in a lot of the different golf groups and so forth, there's conversations coming up about, what's better, TrackMan or, Flight Scope and all these other things. And they're certainly great, and they're definitely needed for the modern game. But I think at the same time, as I mentioned to, I think it was Tom Patry was on the show a couple of years ago, and we talked about this, and I said, they're great tools to have, but what happens when the power goes off and the battery dies and that equipment's not there? Ron, before I let you respond to that, I see that we've got somebody that wants to come online and maybe share some thoughts with us, so let me bring them on.
Yeah, that's me.
Good evening, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. You're on here with Ron Korn.
Hey, Ron Korn, how are you? This is Paul Emma. How are you?
Hey, good, Paul. How are you?
Yeah, very good to hear you.
Good player right here.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of actually having a lesson with Ron, and I've been to Cedar Hill, and Ron is just an amazing teacher and coach, and Cedar Hill is a first-rate place to go play. I've been lucky enough just to be let on, but it's a private place, but it's a special environment over there.
Well, let me ask you this question. I don't know how much of the show you've been listening to, but as we're getting ready to get into the warmer climate up in New Jersey there, and you're going to get ready back out there and playing some golf, what are some of the things that maybe through work that you've done with Ron and just as you've learned as you've gone along the years, what are some of the things that you're going to do to prepare yourself for this upcoming season?
Well, it's funny because I've been just knowing my own tendencies, and I'm 51 years old right now, and I've been starting to notice some flexibility changes happening.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to work on that because I can feel my swing shortening up a little bit, and that's going to definitely be something that I'm going to want to concentrate on, just trying to be a little bit more fluid, trying to loosen up a little bit, because I guess as you get older, things start to tighten up and shorten up just a little bit, and that's a fear already. I could feel like I'm going to already be 20 yards shorter off the tee.
Well, as I don't know if you heard, I don't know if you heard earlier, but I'm going to be 51 next weekend, so I know I have that to look forward to. So thank you very much for sharing that.
That's right. There you go.
Ron,
Paul,
sorry, you were going to say
Paul lives a couple of towns over. He's snowed in like I am.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my, yeah, we got another 8 inches today, so it's something.
If snow shoveling is any good for your swing, we'll be driving par 5s this year, Paul.
There you go. There you go.
Just make sure that you whether you're left or right-handed, just make sure when you're doing your snow shoveling, guys, that you alternate your left and right hand as the primary at the top of the handle there.
Yeah,
that'll help keep you balanced out. But
that's right.
Paul, thank you very much.
Thanks,
and let me just ask you one more thing, Paul, before I let you go.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've done some work with Ron. What were some of the things? What specific areas did you need most help with?
Well, I think when my miss is to the right. I have this. I get this power fade going, and that's always been my son will always laugh. I can hit it long, but it's going right. So we're always working on, trying to move that ball a little bit left to right instead of having it go right. But that's always been, probably my struggle. And Ron has definitely been very instrumental there. And I think also there was a period of time where I didn't even have a driver in my bag, and Ron really helped put one in my bag. So I have to really thank him for that because, without a driver, it's funny. Everyone talks about the long game and everyone talks about the short game and then you talk about putting. But to tell you the truth, to play golf, you have to have all of it. If without one component of it, you can't play the game. So Ron really helped put that driver back in my bag, and that's actually given me the last 7 years of some real enjoyable golf, and I got to thank him for that.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, lastly, Paul, before I let you go, is you bring up a very interesting point, because a lot of guys out there, of course, their ego gets into play, and they want to get out there, and they want to, as we just talked about a few moments ago, about that grip it and rip it mentality that John Daly brought to the tour, and that's fantastic. We all want to hit a great drive and hit it out there long, but sometimes you have to leave that club or take it out completely out of the bag if you're not hitting it that well that day, because there's no point in bringing that driver to the course if it's all over the place. And,
absolutely.
So this is where having some great instruction from somebody like Ron out there that can help put that back in the bag. And what it does for you, Paul, as well, is it gives you confidence. If you're confident that you're going to hit that club well that day, then that's going to help give you a better round as well.
Oh, without a doubt, I feel that. But, I still think golf is about, the total, all of it, It's short game, it's long game, it's hitting your irons right. We all had those days where everything's working, and then we've all had those days where absolutely nothing is working. And, boy, how frustrating. But then, but then last hole, you birdie the last hole, and it's like, wow, I had a great day.
Exactly. There's always...
Golf is an evil mistress, I'll tell you.
That's right. There's always something that brings you back, and that's whether it be a great drive or a great finishing hole. That's exactly right. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for calling to the program and sharing your thoughts, and for having some great comments about a great PGA professional, Mr. Ron Korn. Thank you very much, Paul, for calling in.
You got it. Ron, have a good night, and thank you so much for taking my call.
You're welcome. See you, Paul.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye. It's... it's nice to hear, when you're able to help somebody, because that's confidence is a real key, I think, in golf, is when somebody loses confidence, like Paul did there for a while with his driver, but now you've managed to work on some fundamentals and some different areas that have helped him to be able to put that back in the golf bag. That's huge.
I think what helps try to do too is I try to tell them how normal it is to lose confidence. I mean, people feel like they're the only one out there having this horrible round. They're the only one that can't tee off in front of people, or they're the only one that can't come up 18 in front of a gallery. It's normal. And I think when you let on that it happens to you as a PGA pro, I think they really start to realize that they're not the only ones going through this. It just happened to Ian Poulter. I mean, that he looked like he had no feel for the last 5-6 holes, and could not do what he wanted to do with all that practice and all that instruction and all these sports psychologists. He could not do what he wanted to do. So I think when you let people know that it's really normal and they're not the only ones going through it, I think it helps.
Well, and the other thing too, what I think the average amateur doesn't understand about these guys on tour, unless you've ever been to an event, a live event, and watched on the practice tee even with the pros, I mean, sure, they hit some great shots, but they hit some bad shots too. We don't see exactly how, we might see them hit the shot, and next thing you know, the ball's over in the bushes somewhere. You think, well, it looks like a good shot, and then all of a sudden you hear the announcer saying, oh, it looks like he's going over here, or she's going over there. But you don't really see it. So, there's lots of great editing and things like that go on. So we don't see a lot of these bad shots, but they hit them too. The pros hit them too, and they have to. But it's how they deal with it and how they recover from it that is the difference between the professionals and the guys out there just playing, the weekend warriors, if you will. Let's talk about something that has been around for a long, long time, and I'm sure there's some things that you guys at Cedar Hill have done to help things along. Two words that are just make most golf courses and even a lot of players cringe, and that is slow play. It's been around for a long time. It's going to continue to be around, unfortunately, on some level. What are some things that we can do to help pick up the pace?
Well, I think there's the facility or the golf club. We have responsibilities, and then the player has responsibilities. The player responsibilities are well documented. Keep up with the group in front of you. Don't take too long over the ball. Hit provisionals. The player's responsibilities are well known. But I think if you get 2 or 3 pin placements out there where you cannot lag the ball to the hole, where it cannot slow down, it can't stop, that's no fault of the player. And that's going to be, if you have 2 or 3 of those around, where particularly a lag putt, where you cannot get a 30-footer to stop somewhere around the hole. And that's not, and sometimes, like our superintendent, Dennis Reed, he's been there 34 years. So, and he's really good at asking me my opinion sometimes at 6:30 in the morning, because sometimes a pin, and this is just for regular play, Ted, not for tournament play. Sometimes a pin at 8 a.m. could be really tame, but by 3 p.m. it's unplayable because it dried out. There we go. So if you get a couple of those, and you're not aware that's a couple hours from being unplayable, you cannot hold the players responsible for that. Yeah. And then one other thing that I think most clubs are responsible for is rough height. I mean, I think when you tee off, if you've driven the ball 250, 275 in the rough, you should be able to see the ball from where you're standing. Yeah. I don't. At a country club, I would think the rough should be really no challenge at all. It's just a little fluffier lie than the fairway, unless you're hosting a tournament for 4 or 5 days. So I think some of it, and you don't really hear about the facilities responsibility, but you got to give them a 4-hour golf course. Like in the U.S. Open, that's not a 4-hour golf course. They expect that to take 5.5 hours. Yeah. Not only just because of what's at stake, the awesome prize, but those are not normal conditions. But at a country club, I think you got to watch the pin placements and watch the rough height. And like I said, my criteria for rough, I think, is you should be able to see the ball from anywhere. Versus you went in the rough approximately here, and then you're starting your search. And so I don't think it should be really any challenge at all at a private club under normal conditions. And then the player responsibilities are, the normal. Keep up the group in front of you. Don't take too long. Ready golf. But I think we've done a good job with this little chart we hand out. I have this little chart that we've kind of reduced the scorecard size, and we hand it out on the first tee, and it has all the tee times listed on the left. And then if you go along to the right, it tells you when you should finish each hole. So that's really been, I couldn't believe how helpful that was. So if you've teed off at 7:39 and you get to the 8th hole, you take that out, it probably says like 10:13 or something. And then you can kind of see if you need to pick up the pace or you're doing great. And my members have really taken to this, and they try to beat the times. So it's just a simple item, so I'll have all the times on the left and where you should be at each point. And then we don't have to put any signage up and, anything tacky like that. And they put it in the pocket. And then every 3 or 4 holes, I tell them, just check it once in a while, see where you stand. And sometimes they're 3 or 4 minutes under. And if they take it out and they're 5 or 6 minutes over, they do a great job of getting back in position. So just that little item, I'm surprised how well that has worked at my club.
Yes, that's fantastic, and I know it works great. Ron, I see we have another caller coming in here, so let's bring them on, and I'm sure they've got maybe a comment or question as well. Let's bring them on. Good evening, and welcome to Good evening, welcome to Golf Talk Live. You're on with Ron Korn.
Hey, great. Hey, Ron. My name is Doug. I'm from New York City. I just had a couple of comments and a question.
Go ahead, Doug.
So I wanted to kind of tie it in. It kind of goes well with pace of play and the mental game. Just kind of what you've thought. You see a lot of amateur players, and they're out there, and I think slow play, they almost look like they're playing in the U.S. Open. So what have you seen mentally when you get someone in a better frame of mind, kind of being able to get out there, go through the process, and play better?
That's what I do. I was telling Ted, when I take people on the golf course that I've been teaching on the range, a lot of times I'll say, all right, let's play this hole because this is the hole that's been psyching them out. And if they're on their 3rd or 4th waggle, I'll just back them off. So you just start over. You can't hit with that many waggles.
Right.
So I'll say, look, you got to trigger this hole the way we trigger it on the range. on the range, what do? We look once. We don't get behind the ball on the range. We don't really take a practice swing. So I said, so I'll back the person off, and I'll say, look, I'm going to watch you play this hole, and if you don't trigger this in your normal amount of time, I'm going to make you aware of it. And inevitably, if it's a hole they don't like or a tee shot they don't like, it goes to 4 or 5 waggles, 4 or 5 looks, and I'll just say, you're bogged down now. You can't hit. So right. I think, and I don't really see that until I go on the golf course with them, because I'm controlling the atmosphere and the tempo of the lesson. The pro kind of controls the bow and everything. But when they get on the golf course, the flow of the round is theirs. So I think I try to help them with not doing anything extra. Is what I always. That's the phrase I always use. You can't do anything extra on the golf course. Right, and that's so good that you teach that. I mean, I went through a phase they called me the human rain delay on the golf course because I couldn't pull the trigger. And that's usually rooted in it got too important to you. So, like I always tell, on an intensity scale of 1 to 10, I think you got to play golf at around a 6. So if you're at 10, you've got to knock it down with some kind of self-depreciating joke or something, or you've got to take a hole off from caring. But golf, if you're at a 3 or 4, you're probably not paying attention enough. Anything above a 6, it's not that kind of game. It's a game with hit a shot, take 2 minutes off, and so I think I talk a lot about intensity during lessons, but I'll see a member or a student if the next day is the club championship, halfway through the lesson, it's too intense. Yeah. So I'll try to knock it down with something. You got to keep trying to knock that scale back to 5 or 6, 5 or 6. 10, wrong sport. 3 or 4, not intense enough. So, and I get them to try to be aware of when they're creeping up, and that's what I've tried to do with my own game in a tournament, is not exceed a 5 or a 6 intensity.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean that's great.
Doug, let me ask you before I let you go. Obviously, you indicated you're up in the New York area, so you're much like Ron. You're shoveling out, I'm sure. What quickly, if you can, just share with us what you're doing mentally to prepare for this upcoming season. I'm setting high expectations, but I'm not I'm not too results oriented. I think so many times I'll start a season, I'm always judging my first couple scores, and it's then it becomes you always start on a low note, and I just want to focus on solid contact first, getting in the right frame of mind to play more shot by shot golf, instead of just judging myself on those first couple scores. So mentally it's trying to stay positive, trying to make sure that when I get over the shot, it's just that shot, and that would be a big difference for me that I've never done. Yeah, and I think that the key thing too, Doug, to remember is keep your thoughts realistic, especially at the beginning of the season. You haven't been out there; you're maybe a little rusty if you haven't had the pleasure of either coming south or getting into an indoor facility to kind of keep things warmed up. Keep it realistic. Don't go by the score, as you said. Just shot by shot, and just go back to your fundamentals, and I think you'll be fine. Doug, I want to thank you. I got another caller coming in here. I want to give them a chance before we're getting close to the end of the program. Doug, I appreciate your call and your comments.
Thank you very much.
All right, you have a great evening.
All right, thanks, Ron.
All right, bye. All right, good evening, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. You're on the air live with Ron Korn.
Oh, thanks. This is Frank from Westfield, and I've also had the pleasure of taking, I'm a regular at Ron's range. And speaking of speed, I want to talk about another kind of speed, and that's clubhead speed. I'm 55 years old, and I'm wondering I seem to be right on the border when we work with, the different range devices Ron has down there on between stiff and regular. And am where is going to be the cutoff where I'm going to start to lose ground with a stiff shaft, or, is that not that important?
The flex, everything I've ever learned about it, the flex is not as important as you think. And a lot of people are right on the borderline, so there's no negative to too stiff a shaft or too soft a shaft. The weight is probably more important.
Right.
Lighter shaft, you should be able to swing. Because I've been fit at the Reynolds Plantation by TaylorMade. I've been fit by TaylorMade in New York City. I've been fit by TaylorMade 4 or 5 times, and they always emphasize the flex is not as important as you think. They have all the flexes, for marketing or whatever, but the weight is very important. Too high a ball flight you can bring down with a heavier shaft. Some people need a lighter shaft to get more spin. So when you get too hung up on the flex, I would try different clubs, and when you get the drive you desire, don't worry about what the flex is called. So that's everything that I've been hearing from TaylorMade, who I'm a TaylorMade staff pro, and they tell you could play with one of 2 flexes. Most people play with one of 2, regular or stiff, but get the right weight shaft.
All right. Well, I'll see you at Cedar Hill Range
Frank.
soon. Then hopefully if the snow melts.
All right, buddy.
All right. Thank you very much for your call.
Thank you.
All right. Good night. Well, Ron, we're getting close to the last couple of minutes here. I just want to give you an opportunity just to remind everybody how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in meeting you up at Cedar Hill or elsewhere. If you're working elsewhere, let everybody know that, and then we'll wrap up.
Our season's about to start. You can call me at the golf shop at 973-992-4700, or our website is cedarhillcc.com. And we're in Livingston, New Jersey. Beautiful, beautiful golf course. Dennis Reed's our superintendent for 34 years and keeps him in great shape.
Fantastic. Well, I want to say a special thank you to all the callers tonight that called in and shared some thoughts and some comments for Ron. And Ron, I want to thank you very much for joining me here on Golf Talk Live. It was certainly a pleasure. And please pass the word. Ron, as I say with all my guests, you have an open invitation to come back anytime. And I and Brian are going to talk here real soon. I want to try and get the New Jersey pike going here and get a few of you on here from New Jersey and have the connection going here. But you spread the word back home there and just tell them, any of your fellow pros out there, that they're welcome to come on Golf Talk Live anytime. You know how to reach out to me, so just share that information and have them reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to get them set up. But you, as I say, Brian, and I will talk soon, and we'll get that New Jersey connection going. But Ron, thank you very much for joining me here on Golf Talk Live. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Ted. Stay well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, bye-bye. That was my very special guest, Ron Korn from New Jersey. He is the head professional at the Cedar Hill Country Club up in Livingston, New Jersey. As I mentioned, he was also the 2005 New Jersey PGA Teacher of the Year, and was also was elected to the New Jersey PGA Board of Directors back in '93 and again in 2000, and as mentioned as well, had served many times and chaired on several committees while he was there on the board, and was also named received the Sections Horton Smith Award winner back in '96 and again in '97. Thank you, Ron, for joining me on Golf Talk Live, and a special thank you as well to my Coach's Corner panel. Great discussion, guys. Chuck Evans, Gary Okino, and Pete Buchanan. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me on Coach's Corner. And I want to just, as I wrap up here with just the last minute or two of the program, I also want to thank all of you for the opportunity to bring Golf Talk Live to the airs, all the listeners out there worldwide for faithfully tuning into Golf Talk Live each week. I certainly have, as you experienced tonight, a pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teaching professionals, authors, and even some entrepreneurs stop by the program. And it's through their participation and guest appearances that have helped make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. Also, a very special thank you to some of the sponsors and supporters of the program, Mr. Jonathan Laird of South Coast Golf Guide. You can get a hold of the guide at www.southcoastgolfguide.com. Make sure you visit that website and get yourself one of the South Coast Golf Guides in your hot little hands. Has some great courses here in the southeastern part of the United States, from Texas right over here to the Panhandle in northwest part of Florida. A lot of great courses along that route, and you can get them all and find out all about them in South Coast Golf Guide. Also, thank you to Meredith Kirk, who was on here, made it last week on the show. She was the 2014 Mrs. South Carolina, as well as the owner of Meredith Kirk Golf, and she runs the Junior Golf Exchange program, trying to get some juniors involved there. So make sure that you visit her website at meredithkirk.com and find out more about that. Also, a special thank you to Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, who are here now, originally from Australia, but here now in the United States, I think up in the Maryland area. So they're probably doing a little snow shoveling as well. Thank you, Nikki and Tiffany, for all of your support as well. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf. Thank you, Bernie, always for your support. Mr. Sean Kelly, who is the owner of LinkedGolfers.com. You may be familiar with Linked Golfers, the largest golf community on LinkedIn. As I said, the largest golf community on LinkedIn, Linked Golfers. Sean has very strategically brought many of the great men and women as part of that community out to his own offline business from LinkedIn and on linkedgolfers.com. So make sure you checked out linkedgolfers.com and Mr. Sean Kelly. And lastly, but certainly not least, Mr. Peter Doyle of Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Thank you, Peter, for all of your continued support from across the pond. And just thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in each and every week. And I will see you back here next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central, right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody and have a great weekend.